now.
Correct. We like having Danny as our...
Is someone running this, or are we just going?
We're
for
just
it?
going with it, or what?
What?
I know we got to like 450, right? What time is it?
Yeah. Oh, I break stuff. I'm always breaking stuff.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much always breaking stuff. Thank you for coming in.
What time?
Yeah, we are going to talk about Mortal Kombat.
So is that
And
what
maybe-
everyone's here for, the Mortal Kombat panel?
Right.
Okay, good. Welcome.
And
Thank you everybody for coming.
maybe a little NBA Jam because that's a freaking awesome game too that was happening
I
around
just
the
did
same
that
time.
panel 2 hours ago, so I'm just talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah. We have Sal, Rich.
I'm
Sal
Richard
Daniel,
Divizio. And this
and
is
Tony.
Yep. Yeah, guys, I'm Sal Divita. I played a couple characters in MK3. I was not part of the original game that these guys started, but they pulled me in to be a character
Get
later.
over
I
here.
work at Midway as a game developer. Started with NBA Jam, and then the sequels to that, and then NFL Blitz, and then stuff after that. But during that process, when MK3 came out, they asked me to be part of the family and become a character. So that was 4 of them, I think.
He was already a character, but
Yeah.
to play a different character.
I'm Richard Divizio, aka Kano, Baraka, Cabal, and Quan Chi. Those are my 4 characters that I play. And Daniel?
Yeah, I'm Master Daniel Pesina. I play Johnny Cage, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Smoke, and Noob Saibot.
From Chicago, Illinois, my name is Anthony Marquez. I play Kong La. Us.
He only needed 1 character.
But he did the work as 5
Yes,
with that one character.
he's the rock star of Kung Fu.
So not that we'll take all the questions right now, but how many people do actually have questions that they want to ask later? Okay. Just so I get an idea,
Actually,
we're not rambling on.
I think that's a good way to explore,
Yeah.
partake and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm gonna see if I can extend this out. Hold on.
Hey, real quick, as you're doing that, can
Yeah.
I say that? So I came to Midway Games 1991 or 2 or something like that. But right when Mortal Kombat was being developed, and again, I came in to be a game developer on a different project. NBA Jam was my first game. So when I came to Midway, Mortal Kombat was in development, and it was like in the hallway of the studio that we were developing in, they had an arcade unit without even a side panel on it. There was no art. It was still just newly in development. And I saw Danny on screen as Johnny Cage versus Johnny Cage, the only character they had shot at this point, because they were experimenting. It was this little side project that they were working on. They were just testing things out. They wanted to do like a Street Fighter clone, but not a clone. They wanted to do a different take on it with digitized character technology. And so the digitization, that's even hard to say, the digitization of characters was the driving force of Midway at the time to see if we could do that better than any company has done, because very few companies had done it. I think Atari did it with like Pit Fighter, and I think there was something like Primal Rage that come out early at the time. So they put people on screen, and John Tobias was a big fan of all the old Kung Fu movies, people on screen to see if they could get a compelling fighting game with real digitized characters. They knew that they had to exaggerate things. They knew that they had to make it a spectacle, a show. So lucky they got Danny for that, because being the first character, he put on a show. I came in, I was getting back to my story, I came in and saw Johnny Cage versus Johnny Cage, had no idea, like other than Street Fighter, that the fighting game like even existed, and was just pressing buttons. And once I saw the first uppercut with blood everywhere and the first nut punch, getting down nut punch, I was like, oh my God, there's like something special here. And there weren't many other moves other than that. You were just nut punching and uppercutting for the most part, and kicking and that kind of stuff. But it was very compelling just with those 2 characters. And then from there, Danny came in, and as they started putting more moves in, I'd be out there every day trying it out. And of course, became friends with the team as well, working on the games we were working on, and just saw the game unravel into what it became. And Johnny Cage was the prototype of all characters, and they learned the most from that. I think with Danny's influence on stuff, and then of course the game design team as well, all collaborating together, they came up with something very special with the very first character they developed. So Danny, I think you should talk about your experience with that.
Actually, we'll slowly unfold, really briefly, how we got started, Rich and I, and my brother Carlos got started, was we knew John Tobias and used to hang out, watch movies, kung fu movies and regular movies with him, go to movie theater. This was before, at the time they were still in high school.
Like late 80s.
Yeah, so before
So it was
MK,
real
we-
retro.
We used to do that, and later on, we got a phone call from John who had an idea. He wanted he had an idea about a fighting game.
But even before that, Daniel and I don't know how many of you know this, but Daniel, actually Tony as well, at that time, right before Mortal Kombat, Daniel and I were foot soldiers in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film called The Secret of the Ooze. That's the one with Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby. So Daniel and I had just gotten back from filming that game, and we were not back probably a week when John Tobias had called us and said, we're doing something, but at that time there was no like, hey, we're doing this game called Mortal Kombat. There was no name at that time. It was just you guys.
He had an idea.
Yeah,
of a
so
fighting
you take
game.
it from there.
He had an idea of a fighting game, and we actually snuck into Midway at about 10:30 at night to film some video footage and stuff like that, so that way he could present his ideas to the company. So it started. It just started like with a shell. So after that, it slowly built up. But let's take a question first. And when you have a question, get over here, so that way we can kind of. That way we don't have to repeat the question
Don't
too many
be scared.
times.
He's not gonna hurt you.
And two, well,
Step up.
yeah, step up. It's a panel, and we're all here because of Mortal Kombat, us included. How are you?
Hey,
What's your name?
Rich.
Rich. What's
That's
your
my
question?
name.
Okay. Obviously, like Mortal Kombat became like a big deal with the media in the 90s. How did the people at Midway handle all the controversy and the threatening of
They told us not to say
censorship
nothing.
and all that stuff?
Actually, I would get a call from John or Ed, and they would be like, because I got a big mouth, and they would be like, well, we can't really say anything because we work for the company, but you don't work for the company. So just tell him how this has nothing to do with growing up, because growing up and during that time, I knew if I did something wrong, my parents would straighten me out pretty good. And even though I've studied martial arts and we did all this stuff, and it is about fighting, but it's not about like brutalizing somebody.
Yeah, it's
so,
not.
yeah.
It's exaggerated. It's like the Three Stooges. It's exaggerated violence. You don't really hit somebody in the forehead with a hammer and expect the hammer to bend, or smash up. So it's more slapstick type violence.
Well, cartoons have been doing this type
Right.
of slapstick since the 1940s. You had even before that, Tom and Jerry, who's going to drop an anvil on someone's head or
But
rip someone's heart out. It's not.
Politicians didn't see it that way though, and they found it as a good almost like a lightning rod to to focus on as, hey, these games are getting out of hand because it looked so.
They wanted to use it as an excuse, like, oh, kids are bad. Well, it must be those video games.
Those video games, right? It's not
No.
parenting. It's not keeping an eye on your kids. It's the
Or the
games.
laws they make.
Right, or the movies and all that kind of thing. So entertainment was an easy way of pointing fingers at why kids were so unmanageable at the time, like they haven't been for 10,000 years before that. All
Like
of a
for
sudden-
instance, like
Right.
like one of the fatalities when we were doing that, and I'm ripping the heart out as Kano. I had gotten that from watching the Steven Spielberg film.
Right.
Are they going to go after Steven Spielberg? No.
Right.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The guy they're having some sort of ritual, and the guy sticks his hand in there and pulls this,
And the spine
That's where I got that from. But are they going to go after Hollywood? They were doing
Spine rip
the
is from
blood and
Predator.
guts before MK.
Yeah, the spine rip, is from Predator.
Yeah.
That was an influence from that, and obviously from that everything evolved into what it became. But that was the starting point.
Yeah.
But to give you the official Midway stance on that, like the company stance, being a developer there and seeing it, ignore it. Whatever they say, ignore it. We'll be out. Things will go. We'll be out and gone before they even get a chance to do anything. Just ignore it. little did we all know how big it would become. And then later, that's where the whole Mortal Kombat was one of the reasons for the rating system that happened later. But it wasn't the only one. You know, you had other games that were getting pretty violent too. So Doom was one of them. and that
Yeah,
kind of thing. So-
which is one of my favorite games.
But in terms of, yeah, so if the spinal rip came from Predator and the heart rip came from Indiana Jones, all of these things are, you know, everybody loves this stuff. It's all great entertainment or whatever. But with Mortal Kombat, what I think is most special about Mortal Kombat, oh yeah, this is so violent and da-da-da, then these guys are doing some sort of karate or martial arts, and maybe some of these kids end up doing martial arts. Some of these kids then learn, you know, everything that you do in martial arts, the self-respect, discipline, self-esteem, physical strength. All of these things are, you know, a benefit from doing martial arts, from being influenced by Mortal Kombat. That doesn't come into, oh, I saw Predator, maybe I want to, I don't know, there's no end game to that. Oh, Indiana Jones, oh, maybe I want to go, you know, very few kids, I'm sure, I want to run through the desert and look for treasures in the desert. But from Mortal Kombat, there's a very direct link from Mortal Kombat to martial arts to the betterment of the person. So,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, they're focusing on the negative aspect
Yeah.
of what that game, you know, points out, as opposed to the positive aspects of Mortal Kombat. I'm sorry, of martial arts.
Yeah.
And that's true. Now, that being said, is the Three Stooges was a much worse influence, I think, because I
Oh,
did
they were
want
the
to poke people's
cheese.
eyes out, and I did want to hit people in the head with a hammer,
Wise guy.
because I could. but then you did learn the defense of it. You did learn to do this, right here, to block the icons.
Oh, until they went to the double.
Double, right, yeah.
Yes.
Scissors, paper,
Why
rock.
I oughta. Next question? Go ahead.
Please come up. And what is your name?
My name is Major Hill.
Major Hill.
Yes.
As in a real name, or are you a major? Oh, that's a friggin' awesome name.
Awesome. Yeah.
Do you want to be in a video game?
So,
Major Hill.
so,
Fight.
so what are your martial arts styles? Are they real, like when you had to learn the fighting styles of the characters, were they real martial arts styles, or like what was your martial arts styles and did you have to learn different, you know, the characters' martial arts styles?
Yeah, actually that's why John called me. He was like, you know, a lot of martial arts, so we actually filmed like, even before anything came out, we filmed like 3 or 4 days of 8-hour days, and I would do every single martial art move I did in front of a camera.
Well, hold on, let me ask this question. His question was kind of like, did we have to do the
I'm
martial
getting to
arts
that.
of
Oh.
each character? But I just want to know, is it stated anywhere in Mortal Kombat that says what kind of martial art each character actually does? I don't think it does it?
No, I think it's more about what was the influence of the actors
Okay.
to the game.
Yeah,
as
but we-
that's what I was gonna say.
Right.
knowledgeable people. Yeah.
But with that, if you notice that, especially for the first one, every character had a different style of fighting. Meaning, like you can actually see that they punch different than the previous character or a different character. Every one we made sure would kick or punch a little bit different to give them the personality of the character that we were developing at a time. When we were filming, it wasn't like John had like a list or anything like that. He'd be like, okay, we got this guy, and good example is when we first learned about the ninjas being Scorpion and Sub-Zero, which they really didn't have to name. John came in as we were shooting Raiden, and John was like, you know what, we're gonna shoot a ninja. Instead of having just one ninja, we want 2, and we're gonna change the palette.
Right.
And Carlos looked at John and said, John, why are you being so lazy? we had all these other characters that we wanted to shoot for the game. And John was kind of like, he goes, I'm not lazy, we don't have any time. And then Carlos is like, well, work more hours. Carlos is great. And John is like, well, you know what? These ninjas, and I was like kind of agreeing with Carlos. I'm like, yeah, bub. We call each other bub from the neighborhood. And I was like, yeah, bub, we'll just spend more time. And he's like, well, you know what? These ninjas are brothers, and they're fighting. And then Carlos looked at him, and Carlos is like, I remember Carlos saying, like, looking at me, he's like, brothers don't fight. And then John was like, Well, not only are they brothers, but their father taught them kung fu, and one of them murdered the father to seize the clan. And I was just like, holy shit, this sounds really good.
He put the Jedi mind trick on you.
Yeah,
Totally.
and all of a sudden, John, in a matter of 2 seconds, took like this argument that we were having about having more characters and have a palette swap, and all of a sudden we had Scorpion, Sub-Zero killing Scorpion because he murdered the father of their father. And this feud between these clans.
Yeah,
so
not
in a
everything
matter of
gets created
seconds,
on paper.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just
John
gets
just-
created on the
Yeah.
fly.
in like 2 minutes, all of a sudden like that, we were like, oh, that's so cool, we gotta film this stuff.
And can I tell you from a developer standpoint, the reasons for those decisions is we had very limited memory on the hardware. So like the stand-up things, we had like 8 megabytes total. 8 megabytes for all the images, for all the sounds, for all the animation, every frame and whatever. So they already calculated out how many images they could put on a cartridge, on the cartridges, or on the ROMs. And so John's like, okay, we can't put all these characters that we want, so we have to get creative. So that's where the stories come from, is to get creative with that. And that's why the palette swap, because you have the same images on all of the characters being shot, but you change the palette out, and it's a fraction, because we had 8-bit color, it's a fraction of the memory as it would take for doing all new images with a different costume and all that kind of stuff. Not to mention, getting like the way we did technology is we shot the guys in front of this green screen camera, and then every frame of animation had to be chosen to best portray that move in like 8 frames. 8 frames is all you had, as opposed to 60 frames a second of what video is. Out of those 60 frames for any particular move, 8 frames. So John had to choose those best 8 frames. Then they would hold it on certain frames, like the jump. That's where the jump is just
John
one
is
frame or
badass.
whatever, right? Then they'd have to cut out every frame from the background, every single.
And there
frame
was no
of one move.
Photoshop.
No Photoshop. It was deluxe paint at the time, and it was we
Deluxe
called it
paint.
stripping images from the background. We were all strippers because that's what we did. We stripped
I
images.
remember going into John's office, and every time I would go in there, that's like all he was doing was just
Stripping.
in deluxe paint. I'm like, what are you doing, John? Oh, you're doing that again. It's just like around every character. I was taking
no
this.
glory. There's nothing
Yeah,
like.
when I would show up, I would see John in the same clothes.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, whoop,
Didn't you go home?
didn't you go home? And he'd be like, no, at the time, even people it was a big community.
Oh, yeah.
So you would have like 3 or 4 programmers trying to help push the program, push it along. So he would get all this thing. He's like, no, I got dumped on last night, so I had to spend, the whole day. So with the question, yes, we made sure that everyone had a different style of fighting. Like Richard, like praying mantis, so he had a lot of praying mantis. Tony, like Shaolin, so his character had a lot of Shaolin. Johnny Cage was like Long Fist. Scorpion was 5 animals. Sub-Zero was also Northern Shaolin. But yeah, we made sure that we had different characters.
And
But
John was not
yeah.
a martial artist, so
No.
it was like he didn't say like, "Oh, I need you to do this type of thing." And Daniel was the first one filmed. I was the second. So let's say I did a move that and John would say, "Well, Danny already did that kind of punch. Do you have something else?" So I would do something else, and so that things wouldn't look exactly the same. And even if we did something the same, he has a different flavor in the way he delivers a punch than I do.
Uppercuts. You look at the uppercuts, they're really different.
And
Yeah.
even after the fact, John would alter frames, hold frames, to make them appear different. If 2 things were too similar, like he didn't catch it at the time, he would alter angles of legs. He would alter extensions of stuff with Photoshop. He would like cut bodies and make sure that they extended out a little bit more sometimes if the reach wasn't quite right. So still so much work that went in from everybody involved to make it fight and play the way it did and look the way it did.
Next question, because we only have an hour and we could be here all day. Yes, sir. Your name?
My name's Kenny, and I met you guys downstairs. We were
Yeah.
talking about some of the characters, and I just wanted to get your take on some of these legendary characters now, like Baraka, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and really the question is, did you ever think back in like 91, 1992, that these characters would become like cultural phenomenons? Like when you think of Mortal Kombat now, it's basically Scorpion and Sub-Zero. They've kind of like eclipsed the Johnny Cages, the Kano, Kung Lao, Night Wolves. Did you ever think they'd be as big as they've become?
Yeah, I think first when we signed on, we were only signed up for, when we were making the game, it was a small game. John came in and asked us to do this project, and he was like, we're only gonna do 200 games. And then we presented it to Midway, and the leader of the project turned what we know as MK down. He said no, it wasn't going to be a good game. But he liked our idea of a fighting game, and he said, would you have any problem with doing a game with Jean-Claude Van Damme? And at the time, I was kind of, I like Jean-Claude Van Damme, but like the ideas of the ninjas being Lin Kuei, that was my idea. I was like, you know what, there's usually Japanese ninjas in games, and there's this ninja called the Lin Kuei.
Tell them about the book.
John,
I love this story. You got to tell them about the book.
So then John was
Retract.
like, I never heard of that. And I was like, John, exactly, because they're friggin' ninjas. You're not supposed to hear about them. And so he was just like, he goes, where do I get info on this? I was like, I've got this book, Art of the Vagabond. And then John is like, well, let me borrow the book. And I'm like, no, because I collect comic books. And you never let anybody your comic books because you never see it again. And so I was like, nope, you're not getting the comic books. And he's like, book? I go, we'll go to the store together and you can buy the book. So together, we went to the store, in which I had him buy me lunch, and that was the whole real idea of not lending the book. But then John got the same book I got, and we went forward to do this. So when we were shooting this project, we were like the thing with Jean-Claude Van Damme fell through. So again, we were going to do 200 cabinets, and I used to goof around with John and Ed and say, we're going to make 201 because I'm going to get a cabinet. And then and Ed was like, you know how much they are? No. You guys can't do this, but I'll buy you dinner or something like that. So anyway, food was a major push for MK. But yeah, so no, we never really thought that these would be big as far as that. But I know that Scorpion and Sub-Zero marked the time when all of a sudden we started taking ideas from like the whole ideas about the martial art moves from the whole community of Midway. Before it was usually myself and John, or it'd be me, Rich, and John, or my brother, or Carlos, and John. And all of a sudden, those really marked the whole community putting together, and I think that's why they're so big, because that's the part where like everybody in Midway was like, oh, let's do this or that, which is really cool, because that's when it really sparked that everyone saw a real potential for the game.
Yep.
Next
Go
question.
somebody on this side, because we've been on that side.
Okay, get over here.
Yeah.
Actually, Rich made that up.
We'll tell you that
Hi,
story.
my name is Edwin, and I've been wanting to ask this, where did the inspiration for the uppercut come from?
Like the big uppercut
Yeah,
was
the big
again,
one, right,
but
yeah.
it was like actually that idea to extend the uppercut came from Ed. When we were doing, we shot like for 4 days, and John was like, you know what? All that footage we shot for 4 days, 8 hours a day, we cannot use any of it. And I was like, what? And he's like, when you're standing in front of it and you move a little bit towards the camera, you look a little bigger. And I was like, yeah, I know that. And he goes, yeah, but I didn't realize that. And I was like, oh, we got to mark the floor. So all of a sudden we were like, so that's another thing is John and I designed a little box.
This way you're on the same plane.
Yeah, to
all
be
the
like,
time.
okay, well, if we move forward, the lighting is only overhead lighting. We didn't have like a light kit or anything like that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we had to mark how far we would go forward before the shadows would get, how far back, how far we could go like this, how far forward, draw a strip in the line, draw stirrups, and stuff like that. And then he's like, well, and then he explained to me like, there's these things called hit boxes. And we got to make sure that when you connect with the hitbox, the person gets the proper response. That way you're not getting up like that. And I was like, oh, the move has to be bigger. And then he's like, yeah, so
And not only that, like
Ed thinks
Tom-
that instead of just giving the uppercut like this, like you would in real life, you have to make a big uppercut.
Right, because it wasn't reading very well in the video game. Because
Right.
there's only like 8 frames to define it.
Yeah.
So they had to have
So
a stage play.
the uppercut
Yeah.
is actually
So you stay right where
Yeah.
you're at. Like for
the
instance,
big uppercut is actually Ed's
like
idea.
when
to
two
kinda
of us
get the
are
match the
fighting
hitbox.
each other, here, Dan, stand and do like a fighting stance. When we would, and you just stay right there, don't even move. So let's say we were both fighting each other, and I decided, John asked me, how would you actually fight against someone? So I would just be, like maybe like this.
Yeah.
But now I'm
You can't do
lower than this opponent.
Yeah, you can't do
John's like, no, like I need all characters
Yes.
need to be around the same height. So
Luckily,
it's
I was
even.
the first one, so I didn't have to bend my knees a lot.
Yeah. So, not
Everybody
only,
had to match.
not only that, there's like, he's like, well, all right, what about when you're fighting somebody? So I'm like, I'm like moving around. He's like, no, you're
Can't
moving
do
around a little bit too fast. He's like, can you do something that I can loop? I'm like, all right, well, how about, something like this? So standing there, let me get the profile, so this is what you all recognize. So I'm standing there like this, and I just went.
Right.
And John's like, that's all I need, that's it. So he's like, come on over here. And, or if I was gonna take a walk, I would hold this. So I would do it like,
Right, because that could be looped.
we could loop that.
Mm-hmm.
But he'd say, come over here, look at the screen, and he's like, this is how it's gonna be. And they're gonna tie all that to the buttons
Yeah.
and the programming, so that's kind of how, we're like,
Yeah.
wow, this is
We
gonna be
made,
pretty
once
cool.
we looked at the camera, we kind of made changes. Basically, when I saw people going like this, I was like, you know what? Really, you have to have smaller step, like exaggerate like this, and slow and smaller steps, so that way we can get more motion forward without the lighting changing. So a lot of,
And again-
there's like
Trial and error.
And
A lot of
again,
trial
so
and
this,
error.
this was actually, so at the cutting edge, there was Street Fighter as a bit of a template
Rival?
or a prototype,
Yeah.
right? Because you could look at it, and you knew that you could do idols and that kind of thing. And some of the moves, like even the uppercuts, Street Fighter had some pretty the Hadouken had some uppercuts as well, and it was had some moves as well that were drawn off of. But the art of the discovery of what you could do and what you couldn't do with your footsteps, that came from, like you said, you shoot a bunch of stuff, you try to strip it all out, put it in the engine, try to work with it, and you're like, this doesn't work. It's not looping. I can't get this in 8 frames. He's doing too much stuff. Even the whole in and out of the camera.
Do it again.
So I'll right. So the thing with that was, and this is something that very little people know until you're in the thick of it, is the camera was placed very close to the characters, right? And then with that, you realize that you need like a wide angle in order to fit them because you're closer. But with that comes this thing about if you move just ever so slightly, or even when you throw your fist out or do any subtle motion, it exaggerates the scale of that person to the camera. You wouldn't notice it unless you put it in context in the game. And you're like, wow, this guy looks really weird and his upper half is bigger than his lower half or whatever. So we had to learn to okay, the camera has to be mid-height. You have to pull the camera way back and then zoom up on it because it flattens out the perspective. This way they could move all they wanted and everything looked like a consistent scale. Then the lights as well. The light was very specific. We were just like a bunch of, I don't know.
It was like a storeroom we were in, right?
We were just a bunch of idiots, experimenting with stuff. So lights, we were like from
Geeks.
Home Depot, we were getting lights from there at first,
Yeah.
and then later we evolved to real lights. But that was the first test, and figuring it out, just people without any knowledge of lighting or anything like that, figuring out the steps, and that would bring them back in to look at their stuff and understand. Oh, I see. Let me try this. But it's all this big loop of trial and error, and then even to the point of I had some how big the motions needed to be, because if you just did an uppercut, it was so fast you couldn't really notice it. It didn't look distinguishable, and so you had to do something so sweeping that would hit a guy if he was jumping, if he was mid-height, if he was about to duck a couple frames. It would catch people like that. And it really helped the gameplay. And then they could see their moves on video as well, because it's all recorded on videotape. So they could look at it afterwards and see if it read well. And then go, oh, okay, no, I want to, let me do it again. Let me do it again, because I don't like the way they turned out. And they would run back and do it a different way to accommodate.
Another question?
This gentleman
You
right
pick.
here.
You pick.
Yeah.
I picked the last one.
Pick them all. Your name?
Hi, Joseph Montalano. I have a question. One question. This is kind of a technical question, might be more for Sal, but I guess first of all, does the original video of you guys performing, does that still exist anywhere? And if so, it doesn't. Okay.
Well, no, I own 8 hours.
Yeah.
But the original 3 or 4 day, 8 hour day, we taped over that to save money on tape. Two, so you know how low budget was. First, when we shot for those 4 days, John and I would go to desks throughout Midway and tape the name of what person we got the desk lamp from to make the lighting for Johnny Cage.
Right.
And then after we were done shooting, we would pick this up, take the tape off, and I would go set it on the desk, and he had a box, and we would all do that. Two, true story, I go, hey, are we filming today? John calls me up. We're not filming today. What happened? He's like, I forgot to ask permission from my dad to use his camera. So we were shooting Mortal Kombat. We shot Mortal Kombat on John's father's camera because we weren't allowed to use the camera from Midway. We were so low budget.
So the footage it doesn't exist anymore.
So
It's
I
only
have-
those 8 frames now.
No, I own 8 hours.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I own 8
Well,
hours
so then
of
my
footage.
question was
Which is on YouTube. You can see just type Mortal Kombat behind the scenes.
Okay.
Yeah,
can
so all that footage is actually mine. Just people decide to.
Sure.
In this world, they decide
Sure.
to put their watermark on it, even though they don't friggin' own it. It's kind of weird, but
Would it be
You know, it does.
conceivably possible to for there ever to be like a remaster with that footage, or maybe you
Oh,
could bump
extremely
up the
doubtful.
frame rate or something
The
like
logistics of that are.
or just impossible?
No, because it's all.
It was
It's all high eight?
High 8 video.
Well, not
So
only
it's-
that, don't forget the successive games. So that was Mortal Kombat 1. Mortal Kombat 2 there was no videotape of that. We shot that straight to
Yeah, there's
hard
no
drive.
behind the scenes for that
So
one.
straight to hard drive. So they're actually digital files, and they're proprietary image files and animation files that unless you have the old system, you can't even boot up anymore, and don't even know if that exists. So specific hardware, it's a Targa card that we used on a PC on Windows 3 or something like that.
Targa.
It's
I haven't even heard of that.
Barbaric.
Right. So
Yeah,
it
that's
was
20,
very
the
proprietary.
technology is 25-year-old,
Right.
you know, that's, so, yeah.
But
We had-
some of that stuff was saved off as single frames. Like I have a lot of my stuff from like WrestleMania and from NBA Jam still. And I would imagine that John might have some old computer or something that some of that stuff might still live on. But
On a jazz drive.
on a jazz drive somewhere.
Remember those?
Dude, I remember tape backups. So like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
on audio cassettes.
Floppy.
So, yeah.
Next question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah, come over and introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eric. And this is sort of a general question, and I know it might be at least half obvious given what the costumes everybody's wearing, but what, out of the games that you worked on, which game and which character from that game did you have the most fun shooting?
Naturally, mine is Johnny Cage because he's the father of all Mortal Kombat characters. Even today when I watched some of 9 and 10, I'm like, wow, I thought of that for number 1. And now they're putting in number 10 or things like that. Like there were so many ideas we were thinking about when we were doing the game in different ways to make the game just special and more geeky. That happened, but originally, yeah.
All right, so I enjoyed the first experience, Kano, because it was new and, learned a lot and got to be very creative. Baraka, I did not like because I had to wear this Nosferatu mask, which was skin tight on my face, and we were under lights, and we got better lights then, I think. Maybe, I can't remember, but it was hot and just sweating down my neck, and I hated that. Cabal, I can't even remember, I just know it was probably hot too because they had that helmet on. But as far as, when we did mythologies, Quan Chi that was kind of difficult because I was actually in paint
Yeah, you were in paint. Now the other thing
and
too,
doing moves, and then there was always these John Wood's, Quan Chi's costume has all these pointy things on his shoulders, so I would be doing the moves, but then John would say, oh wait, hold on a second, you're gonna do a flip here, so we gotta take this point out, this point off your shoulder, because you're gonna do a flip with that point on.
Stab yourself in the
And stab yourself or whatever. Same thing with Baraka. When we did Baraka, when the blades weren't retracted, we had to take time to take those out, put those back in for certain, things. And yes, okay, if anybody wants to know what they're made out of, they were made out of Mylar, like cardboard covered with like a chrome fake looking Mylar.
Now,
But,
I heard
yeah.
a rumor.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to put you on the the spot here.
Okay.
So Quan Chi, yeah, you better be worried.
Okay.
So Quan Chi, he was supposed to have white eyes. And I remember that you were asked to wear white contact lenses, which you refused to do.
Yeah, because I don't wear glasses, I don't wear contacts, and I don't want to put anything in
You
my
put
eyes.
the contact lenses in. I've been wearing them for 45 years. Put contact
Maybe,
lenses in.
maybe I will, but I just don't want to. I don't want
They're
to.
contact lenses. They're safe.
Kung Fu rock star, quiet guy.
But
Yeah, so
what's up, quiet guy?
I think that, in all honesty, Mortal Kombat 2 may be the greatest game ever. And let's just put that out there on the board right now. But I liked how I looked in MK3 because that looked really good. And then when we did Mythologies, we're both monks in that one, and Rich like that, so it worked.
Bald already.
And so I had a skull cap on or whatever. And this is why I really, really, for the longest time, hated the movie Mission Impossible. Because, okay, so I got the skull cap on, and we're doing everything, and then, fine, we're done. And we're trying to take the skull cap off or whatever. And it's, glued to your head or whatever. And the process is really, really slow to take the prosthetic off or whatever. But I just watched Mission Impossible, and they're just tearing these things off their faces.
Funny. Yeah, that's so funny.
Dude, get out the way. I tore this thing off my head, and there's this big old gash in the back of my head.
Where the hair came out.
Wow. Yeah, the technology wasn't as good as Mission Impossible.
Yeah, by the time,
Because they had a big budget, and we didn't have a budget. A lot of times John would have to pay for stuff out of his pocket.
No, but Tom Cruise, that's not who that is. See, I'm Tom Cruise, aha! So I figured I could just pull this thing off my head.
One thing, can I tell a quick story about Mythologies? Because it's actually a testament to you, but go ahead,
Okay.
you go
I just
first.
want to, this will go right into that.
Yeah.
I just want to say, when we did Mythologies, which was between 3 and 4, I got to play Quan Chi, which that's one of my favorite things, because John was like, we're going to do these little movies, like these little mini movies, and when you get to a certain level, we'll play these little FMVs, full motion videos. And so I love that part because I wanted to do acting and stuff, and it gave me a chance to be able to, act.
Yeah.
So, and I love that. So
that's what I was going to play into. So
Okay.
that's exactly what I was going to talk
We
about.
actually wanted that in one.
Something. Well, that was a whole memory.
No memory.
So, but,
Quiet. He's talking some good stuff about me. So
right. Yeah. I have actually something nice to say now. So, so Mythologies. I acted versus Rich in that as Sub-Zero. Sorry, but I was Sub-Zero for that, and Rich was acting, saying lines, dialogue that he actually memorized. I wasn't even, cool enough to memorize my lines, I think. But Rich memorized his lines, and he delivered the lines so professionally and so compellingly. I remember watching him going, "Damn, Rich, you have an unrealized talent as a real actor, a real actor."
Greetings.
And it wasn't even cheesy like that. It was really good acting that he was doing. And I remember looking at him and going, "Damn, Rich, you should totally do some auditions for some real movies."
do not question me, Serena.
Right.
And more importantly, do not fail me.
Yeah.
We have toyed with the ninja long enough.
Yeah, right. You still remember it. You still remember it.
Oh, I know all of it.
No, go back and look if you can find it. If there's any video on it, I'm not sure. But go back and look at Rich's stuff back then. He did a great job, and I
Yeah.
need that as a professional actor. It's he did a great
Besides
job.
Tony, he's the best
You'll be
actor.
$20 later, by the way.
Quick question. Let's try to move.
We got
only
10
have
minutes, I think.
left. Anyway, yes, sir. Come on up. Introduce yourself.
Oh, you wanted to know about fatalities? Okay, we'll talk about that.
My name's Kurt Fox. I'm actually third year Retro World Expo Mortal Kombat 2 champion. But just wanted to you guys are definitely an influence, and I was just wondering what Native American nationality would.
Do you think I even thought of that?
I didn't even know.
They asked me, we worked together.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I was doing at the time. I think I was probably just walking by John at one point, and John was walking by me. He's like, "Hey, Sal, want to be a character in Mortal Kombat? In Mortal Kombat sometime?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, just let me know when." And then I went into the room, they put a costume on me, and then they asked me to act stuff out, and I did the best that I could as a Native American, but I didn't know the backstory or anything. That's all John stuff. I just did my job.
Can you do the Night Wolf look?
Oh, nice. Yeah. I was just gonna ask, when you see the future in games like Mortal Kombat, because they don't use like the real life style anymore. So like, and I feel like that's lost in good fighting games now.
Yeah.
So that's last.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just a whole. I think it's just hard to control that stuff. You know, they don't want to go the route where one person is the character and that's it. So you know, it would be difficult to do.
Let's talk about fatalities, because we don't have a lot of time, but
Okay,
I want to get this story out.
Okay.
All right, so.
Rich created Get Over Here.
Well,
he actually did.
Get Over Here is one of the most iconic, you know.
I'm gonna say this because you should be talking.
Okay,
about
hold
this.
on.
You look conceited.
No.
Okay.
No, I just want to. I'm gonna just slate it here that it's one of the most catchphrases that are out there. And how did this happen?
Okay. So what happened was we were getting ideas for
This is true.
the ninjas, and then John is like, "Hey, is it okay if Ed gives us some ideas from the game?" I was like, "Okay, really cool. Yeah, let's hear his ideas." So Ed's first ideas was, he's like, "Well, you're gonna have a lasso like a cowboy, and you're gonna throw it at the guy, and then you're gonna drag him over." And then I was like, "Well, Ed, I'm not Wonder Woman, so I'm not going to do that." And two, at the time, because I didn't see Ed that much when we were creating the game, you know, he was doing the programming and stuff in the back and not the actual, like the stuff on the film. I didn't really, everybody else was afraid of him, but I wasn't because I didn't really know that he was a big boss. So I was like, no, but there's a weapon called a rope dart. And I had one and I showed him what to do. And Rich is like, that is really cool. What if you throw it into this chest and you pull him over here, and then he, in the Kano voice, says, "Get over here," and then gives him an uppercut. And to this day, when you hear that voice, that is Ed mimicking Kano saying, "Get over here."
Yeah, Ed did the voice for that.
Yeah,
eventually,
yeah.
right.
And that's
But
he
shows
does
you
it
the
exactly like.
it shows you the
yeah.
evolution of things. So
Yeah.
maybe the Wonder Woman rope idea wasn't the
That was
best.
me being a smartass.
Right, yeah, and we shouldn't disparage Ed for that because
No,
it's
no.
just like the
Yeah.
idea of
Yeah.
that, like getting somebody close to you, closing the distance like that is a good idea.
Yeah, it
obviously.
is.
And so he had the idea of somebody getting pulled close to you, closing distance, and then it evolved into, hey, no, instead of the rope thing, you know, being buddies and kind of just like saying, no, you know, I'm not Wonder Woman or whatever.
Yeah, 'cause that's what we
let's
were always
do a
doing,
hook
yeah.
instead, something more visceral, something more violent. Like,
Yeah,
Well, I was
More
asking
martial
John,
arts.
I'm like, when are we going to like incorporate weapons? And I'm like, Danny's got a weapon in his bag. I want to see what this thing looks like. Pulls out this rope dart, and what is this thing used for in China?
It's used to pull horsemen off their horses.
oh yeah.
Okay, hang on. Let's stop
Yeah.
right there. So Danny had a weapon in his bag.
Whatever.
Yeah,
So
why didn't that
anyway,
reason?
so yeah, I was just thinking, you know, you could just stick it in the guy, and you could just reel him back, and you know, and just tell him, "Get over here."
Right.
You know, and I didn't say it in that voice. I was just like, "Get." I actually probably did say it like that. I said it like, you know, like, "Get over here," just like that. And you know, and then you just finish him off with like an uppercut or something. But that's what ended up happening. And
And
what
yeah,
about?
it's part of the evolution.
Yeah.
of
Yeah, it's part of the
Yeah,
collaboration.
And
Yeah.
how it happened.
there are 1,000 great ideas that happen, like both 1,000 great ideas in the game that all can be put in. But there's also a few bad ideas that start off that evolve into great ideas
Yeah.
eventually, right?
Yeah,
So it's all
it was
part of
a
game
big
development.
collaboration.
Yeah.
Most of all, we were always being a smartass.
Right.
And we were always teasing each other, and we always would take the best idea. So even though we would tease each other, whoever had the best idea for the game, that is the idea
Yeah.
that we took. Another idea of like Ed was freezing somebody. He's like, "Daniel,
Oh, this is a good one. I like
Yeah, I want to freeze somebody. Can you think of a really cool way to freeze somebody?" But you know, I didn't come up with the idea of freezing somebody, but he came up to me and was like, "Okay, you think of a good way to freeze somebody." So I was like, "Oh, I'm going to pull moisture out of the air, make it in a freeze ball, and then freeze." And so we kind of collaborated on that. So
And
it was always,
Yeah, the moisture out of
most
the
of the
air.
times we were goofing around and being smartasses.
Yeah.
Not to mention
Those
that
are some
even
good
after
stuff.
things were shot, they were used for things that they weren't even intended for by John and Ed and the rest
Yeah.
of the team. They would
Yeah.
create frames. They would take frames that had nothing to do with what they were shot for and make them into something else. So it would always be this thing where you're just trying to reuse frames, and you're like, dang, I don't remember shooting that, like at least for Nightwolf. I don't remember shooting that. It's like, no, you didn't. I just had to turn it into this from these other frames that you shot.
Now, did you know that, you know, I used to hang out with Dan a lot, so I'd go with him when he was filming Scorpion, and you were doing the fatality, well, I guess it was like, well, what kind of, like he said before, you know, John didn't have a list of like, well, this is the fatality you're doing today. It wasn't like that. It was like, all right, we'll come up with something. So there was this collaboration, and I love skeletons, like Jason and the Argonauts and all that kind of stuff. So I was thinking,
okay,
he should just take this.
Okay, this
tell
is
him the
this,
story.
Okay, this is how smart ass it was. So John is like, you know what? I got to move for this guy. He's gonna blow fire out of his mouth and burn his opponent. And I was like,
I thought of that. John didn't think of that.
So I was just like, no, not that part. Blowing the fire is John's idea, because I was like a smart ass, and I looked at John and I'm like,
I'm out of here.
and then I'm like, John, I was like, no, he wouldn't do that, because if you blow flames, his mask would light his whole head on fire. It being a smart ass. And John is like, well, you're gonna pull down the mask. And then Rich is like,
Okay,
well,
there we
even better, pull off the mask, and he's like a skull.
And then
he blows the fire, and that's how that happened. So
Yeah, 'cause I was like, well,
somebody
I'm gonna
being a
ask, suppose
smart
he's a
ass and
skull
saying
under
like,
there.
no, that's not realistic to do. That was me being a smart ass to John, and John is like, well, pull the mask down, and Rich is like, oh no, take the whole mask off, and you're like a skeleton. So anyway, we really had a lot of goofy
fun we
Yeah,
had.
it was really cool. But John is really freaking creative.
But
last question.
Yeah,
last
but hang
question.
on.
Yeah,
But in
okay.
terms of, you know, changing things from, you know, the current technology, how they do games or whatever, to getting back to real people in games, you guys actually control the market. If there's enough demand for, you know, real people doing the games again, or even like, you know, MK 25 years later, that would be awesome, I think. You know, if there's enough demand, the game will be made. So it's up to you guys.
Social media. Everybody does it.
I'm sorry, but you know, anybody has any questions, you can stop by the booth and ask. We're all,
Well,
we're all there. But last question.
We don't have another panel pressing right now on us, so
Yeah, but we got to
there's nobody in the hall.
respect their time. Yes, sir. Come on up, introduce yourself.
Fight.
Is Lance around?
I don't
Lance,
know.
you here?
I mean, yeah, I don't see
Until
anyone.
somebody kicks us out of here.
Yeah, until someone kicks us out of here. I mean, what
Nobody-
are the Mortal
nobody-
Kombat guys, you know?
I'm here, nobody's kicking us out.
Yeah, no one's kicking us out.
All right, go ahead.
My name's Brandon.
Brandon,
When the game, speaking of 4, 9, and 10, when they wasn't doing digitized actors, how did you guys really feel about that?
Well, 4, I remember the reason why, and I wasn't a developer of any of the Mortal Kombats, I was just an actor, I was a developer of other games, but I was right there when we were moving on to the 3D technology that we see so much now. And it started with like NFL Blitz, and then from there, that's where MK knew that they had to evolve with the times and felt like they needed to do 3D characters as well. That technology was more for what the market wanted at the time, which was, oh, this cool new tech. Because with that came new smoothness, new types of effects, because it was less memory intensive, believe it or not, than the frames. And it was, you could reuse those motion capture moves. And I'm not sure who did motion capture, if you guys did motion capture for MK4. I also did motion capture for MK4, but that was the new thing. And with that, though, came the idea of, okay, let's encapsulate the real characters that we design, and the people themselves aren't as important, you know, anymore. It's like these are invented characters. It's more about the cartoon aspect of it or whatever. Not understanding maybe how important it was to have
Yeah, but it's
something
technology. It has to
recognizable.
move forward.
It's technology that was moving forward, and it became something where it's more about the character design as opposed to the actor that's playing the character. And so 50-50, you know, it was cool to move on to the new technology because you get so much from 3D, but at the same time you lose that personality.
Yeah, but that's why, again, 25 years later, we're still talking about this, because there's the personality in the pixels.
Right. Yeah, you're not talking about MK4's, you know, anybody, because and no 3D characters walking up here that's going to do a talk to anybody either. So.
And then, but also on a personal note, I love the latest MK. My son actually does motion capture for the newest game. So yeah, it's great. Us.
Yeah. You ready?
But yeah, but thanks for having us out, chatting. It's good to
Yeah,
know
come by.
you guys.
Yeah, come by the table, hang out with us. It'll be a good time.
Are you guys ready?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, hang on. While we're all here, it was Rich's birthday 2 days ago. So let's sing him a happy birthday.
There you go.
Ready?
La, 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 la.
1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rich. Happy birthday to you.
All right, come on, let's go downstairs.
Thanks, everyone.